Tennessee lost to Kentucky 75-64. Now, I know it's part of our poll question, but Caleb, how disconcerting, if at all, should this be? It is a regular season basketball game. That's been said for 30 years. However, it is Kentucky. So how concerned should you be as a Tennessee fan about the way things shaped up last night?
The biggest thing that would concern me would be how they basically took their foot off the gas defensively once they took a lead late, but I don't put up too much stock into the way they lost from the conglomerate of the game. And the reason I say that, and I know that's a hot take, is that Tennessee shot 3 of 18 from 3, Kentucky 12 of 24. Now, I know you say, well, you're going to have bad shooting nights in the NCAA tournament, and you have to overcome it, and Tennessee didn't. But I don't think it'll be that bad, because one of the things I want to point out, and Dave, I'm sure you would agree with me on this, is that Tennessee, Rupp Arena itself is worth 3 missed shots for your team and 3 made shots by Kentucky. I think there's like from three. I think it's worth like 3 of 18 is 6 of 18 on a neutral site. Rupp Arena is going to cost you 3 3-pointers.
Okay. Work with me on that, because that feels like that's not the mindset that Chris Lofton had when he went up there. So
I'm saying if you're having a bad night shooting, the home crowd of Rupp Arena is going to cost you 3 more shots. Let's try one more time to try to get Jimmy in and see if we can get him to give a take on this.
We're going to try Jimmy again. Jimmy, do we have you?
Yes.
Yes, we got him. We got you, Jimmy.
I've never been happier, like in the last at least 4 months.
Oh,
Jimmy. Actually, the last time that I was with Jimmy and we had lunch, that was a fantastic lunch. So that's probably the last time I've been this happy. All right, so Jimmy, let's roll. How big of a concern, if you're a Tennessee fan, should the loss to Kentucky be?
The loss not as big of a concern as the fact that you have these incredibly bad shooting nights or bad shooting games. This is at least maybe the 4th game in which Tennessee has not made a 3-pointer in the first half. I know they didn't against Auburn. I know they didn't against Florida the first time around. They didn't last night. Now, they were wise not to shoot 45 3-pointers, but they couldn't hit. The only person that made a 3 last night was Igor Milicic. The 3 guards that you would expect to make shots, which include Chaz Lanier, Zakai Ziegler, Justin Gainey, Jordan Gainey, 0 for 13. And what I thought was remarkable, Kentucky shot almost identical to what they shot at Thompson-Boling Arena. 12 for 24 on threes, exactly 50% from the field. This time it was 26 of 52. Last time it was 25 of 50. Those numbers are startling. And it was with different people, because Kentucky was without 2 players when they played in Knoxville. Then they were down a couple of players when they played against Tennessee here. But it just concerns me that Tennessee in the start of some games has gone over from 3-point range, whether it was attempting 6 or 7 threes or whether it was attempting 14. That's what bothers me more than just the fact you lost to Kentucky.
Yeah, and Richard made reference, by the way, if you want to message us, we'll be glad to put that on the screen there. But it said 2 bad shooting nights against Kentucky. At least Tennessee didn't jack up 45 threes. Help me with this name, because it goes way back, like 2006-ish. Who was the Kentucky player who scored like 60-something points? But there was a
Jody Meeks.
Right, Jody Meeks. So what's the more?
50, I think it's 54 at Thompson-Boling Arena.
Yeah, 54. So what's the more memorable stat long term, that Tennessee jacked up 45 threes, or that Jody Meeks scored 40-something?
Probably Jody Meeks. And I think it was 54, and I think it was against Buzz Peterson.
No, it was against Bruce Pearl, 2009.
It was against Bruce Pearl? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I misremembered that. So I guess since I misremembered that, I got to go the 45 threes. I didn't remember the right year.
Yeah. Well, I didn't remember how to set up the studio properly. Go ahead, Caleb.
Jimmy, I want to dive in real quick because you were right. But the reason I don't consider this as much of a concern, and I want to know your thoughts. You brought up how they shot so poorly at Florida, at Auburn, at Kentucky, and I raised the red flag after Florida. They still were able to get 64 points last night in a really, really, really bad shooting night from three. They had open looks. What do you think of my take that a place like Rupp Arena is just whatever, like it's good for 3 missed 3-pointers that you wouldn't get on a neutral court in the NCAA tournament, just that home crowd by itself?
Well, somebody said Chris Lofton didn't have any trouble making threes up there.
Yeah.
Who was that?
Might have been me.
There's no Chris Lofton on this team.
No, there's not. That's a concern. And Lanier's still shooting around, 42% from the field, but he can't go 0 for 7. I think that's what he was. He can't do an 0 for 7. What's kind of most of Tennessee's bad shooting games have been on the road. They've also had bad shooting games at home. I mean, they shot poorly the first half against Florida at home, and they ended up winning that game by 20 because they shot very well the second half. So I don't know that the opposing arena – I don't know if Rupp Arena is any harder to play than at Auburn or at other places. And I don't – here's what blows me away. Kentucky entering the first Tennessee game, do you know what their defensive efficiency rating was by KenPom? 81. They gave up over 100 points. They gave 100 points to Florida. They gave up 100 points to Alabama. This is not a great defensive team, and Tennessee shot poorly both times, whether it was at home or on the road. I don't know why. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Was Kentucky doing anything defensively different against Tennessee? I don't know. But for whatever reason, Tennessee, those kind of games, though, and it's not just Kentucky, but those kind of games concern me about Tennessee's ability to make a run in the NCAA tournament.
I would agree with that. And I'm curious still to this point, and maybe people are having this discussion in every other market, but I don't really know what this team's identity is. And that to me is the most disconcerting part of it. Do you?
Okay, here's their identity. Their identity is that they play really hard and they're very good on defense, and they're incredibly inconsistent on offense. That to me is their identity. That's not exactly what you want. I do think this, and I think these numbers bear it out. I think if you're right, and by the way, Tennessee's 3-point defense leads the nation, and yet Kentucky has gone 50% in back-to-back games against them for whatever reason. I think if your defense efficiency is ranked number 1 and your offense is ranked 50, you're not going to advance very far in the tournament. If your defensive efficiency is ranked 15 and your offense is ranked about 20, you will. You have to be good on both ends of the court. I think if your offensive efficiency is ranked in the top 3 or 4 and your defense is in the 60s, you're not going to make it either. I think you have to have that balance. If you look at a team like Connecticut that won back-to-back, or some of those teams that have done really well, their defense and offensive efficiency typically ranks in the top 35. And that's what I think Tennessee's got to get to offensively.
Jimmy, weirdly, and I agree, and the concern, doesn't it, see, the first time they played Kentucky, it just looked like there was no motion. They were not getting good looks. Sakai was forcing 11 threes. Taking another, I guess, me being the one putting the positive spin on this game, and I never really do that, funny enough, but didn't it seem like they actually ran their offense well last night, though? I mean, they got the looks they wanted. They played the inside-out game that I think they need to play. Wasn't it? It really was just a case of the shots not falling, wasn't it? Because they got the looks.
Well, I think there was some of that. I do think Kentucky, they challenged Lanier on some of his threes. They were in his face. Tennessee didn't get as many open looks on threes as they did the first. Of course, they didn't take as many. So I actually thought Kentucky's defense a little bit better. Caleb, here's what bothered me about Tennessee's offense. They got several offensive rebounds, right? Almost every time they got an offensive rebound, they ended up jacking up a shot because it was almost like they didn't realize the shot clock reset at 20 seconds and not 30. I'm like, what are you doing here? But many times I'm like, and then it's down to 4 seconds and you got Meshack out there with the ball. It's like, oh, okay, that's a lost possession. So I don't think they did a good job after getting offensive rebounds of getting set quickly in their offense to run a play that gave you a chance to score a basket.
Jimmy, I don't want to throw something out of left field on you, but it's something that I said a month or two ago on the show, and that is Lanier to me looks like, if you're watching a video, he kind of pushes the ball up, and that speaks to Kentucky stepping up on him on defense, because I know he has a quick release, but I just feel like that shot is problematic, not just for Tennessee, but for his career.
Well, he still leads the team in three-point shooting. He still averages almost 18 points a game.
Yeah.
But
do you? I mean, you're an athlete. I mean, do you notice that like I do? I mean, it sticks out to me that he kind of pushes the ball up instead of shoots the ball.
Well, I've seen people. I don't want to go behind my head like you just demonstrated. That's not what you want.
No.
And I know last time you said this, I mentioned Steph Curry, who shot the ball here, and it was a low delivery, but it was very quick. And I actually think Lanier has a decent mid-range game. Now, I'm not that crazy about him taking to the basket because he gets it blocked. And he doesn't have the elevation around the basket that a Dalton Connect did. So I'm not as concerned with that. But I will say this, and this may kind of lead to your point. He does shoot it quickly because he has a bit of a low release. He's got to shoot it quickly. And Barnes wants him shooting it quickly and tell him he's got to get ready to shoot. And so maybe when you get just a little bit off when you're shooting it that quickly, maybe that leads to an 0 for 7. Maybe that's why you have a game like that. So he's been when he's hot, look out. But when he misses the first few shots, man, it's almost like time to put that gun back in the holster.
Well, yeah, I would just say this. I'm going to lead into what Caleb has to say. I just believe that pragmatically, he's going to have an issue because he can't take it to the rack, and people are going to walk up on him, and they're going to play his outside shot a little bit more. And to me, that would trouble me most as a Tennessee fan moving forward. Go ahead, Caleb. I'm sorry.
So Jimmy, I want to know your thoughts on one of the things we had Steve Hamer on yesterday and last week, but he talked about how, and I kind of thought about this too. What do you think of the idea that Tennessee wasn't, through no fault of their own, wasn't as prepared for SEC basketball play because the schedule that they put together in November and December, while they thought it was going to be difficult, turned out to be a heck of a lot easier than they thought it was going to be, and because a lot of the teams turned out to be a lot worse than we all thought they would be.
Well, they were tested by several teams. I would say Illinois was probably the best non-conference win, right?
Yeah.
Probably.
Louisville's turned out to be a pretty good one too.
Yeah, in Louisville, that's a good win. They were ranked. I'm not sure if they are now, but they were ranked. That was a good team. I thought they had some good non-conference wins. So okay, you know that the Norfolk Stakes of the world are not going to be a challenge. I get that. But I thought Tennessee had 4 pretty good non-conference wins. Maybe I'm miscounting that. But
well, I think a lot of the teams we thought were good, like Baylor's not that good this year. Syracuse and Virginia are abysmal this year. And then Miami too. Syracuse, Virginia, Miami, like the ACC road that they thought they had that was going to be tough. Those all 3 of those teams are complete garbage this year. That's
fair. That they weren't as good as you thought. And I know what you're saying is you can't blame Tennessee for that schedule because it looked good on paper. But in reality, it was kind of like in football, Tennessee played NC State. A lot of people thought they projected NC State to win 10 games this year, and they ended up not being very good. So I get that, and maybe there's a little bit more credence to that as I rethink that some of those opponents that they played weren't all that good. But I do think this. I do think that I'm not sure if you had played better opponents, would you have then made some 3-pointers in the first half against Florida or Auburn or Kentucky? I don't know. But I do know that the SEC is a gauntlet. It's very difficult. There are teams in the SEC, and Tennessee is one of them, that were actually ranked higher in the national poll than they were ranked in the SEC standings.
Yeah. What was it, Steve?
Third.
Wasn't it? I guess it was about 10 years ago. Steve Spurrier was quoted as saying, "It's harder to win the SEC title than the national title in football. Just ask Nick Saban." And it's turning to be that way in basketball.
Yeah. It's tough.
Derek leads us into today's tough question, brought to you by Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. They have no interior post game from the key. Will that keep Tennessee from being Sweet 16 team or a Final Four team? We'll discuss today's tough question, brought to you by Banks and Jones.
Why Banks and Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks and Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks and Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks and Jones. T. Scott.
All right, so Jimmy, what you saw last night and what you've seen to this point in the season is Tennessee, because Chaz Lanier isn't Dalton Connect. Are they limited to a Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four run? Where would you see them falling if you had to make a prediction? Because we're getting close to March.
I would limit them to the Sweet 16. And now some of that could be matchups. I get that. I am not in the camp that says it's that it's all about matchups, because it could be how you play. I mean, if you want to make that argument, was it all about matchups and Florida beat Tennessee by 30? And then Tennessee turned around and won by 20. So a lot of it has to do with how you play. But Tennessee's inconsistency on offense and the unpredictability of them hitting threes makes me think that this team has a ceiling that they won't go beyond the Sweet 16. I think they get to the Sweet 16 because I think they're going to get a favorable seed, and I think they can beat their first two opponents. They might be playing a 14 or a 15 seed and then advance to play maybe a 7 or a 10 seed. But I don't see them going beyond that. I just don't think there's enough consistency. Here's the interesting thing, too, about the inside scoring. In the last 3 games, Tennessee had outscored its opponents by 54 in the paint. That's pretty darn good, including they flipped the switch on Florida. I think these numbers are right. Florida outscored Tennessee in the paint 40-14 in Gainesville. Tennessee outscored Florida in the paint 30-14 in Knoxville. Now, explain that. But I will say this. Tennessee does not have a consistent inside scorer. I saw this stat. Felix Okpara has 76 made field goals. How many are dunks? 50.
Oh, yeah.
50. And those are based off.
I would have actually guessed 60.
60. Most of those are alley-oops, okay, which teams can take away, and some of them are offensive rebounds. He doesn't create many baskets for himself when you feed him in the post. Neither does Cade Phillips, and neither does Milicic. I think Milicic has the ability to do that a little bit better than what he has shown so far.